I wanted to hop on here today and tell you about a moment, more like a series of moments. But I'm going to speak to one moment in particular that really, truly, deeply changed my life. And what I mean by that is it completely changed the way that I show up in each moment in life and the very serious beneficial impact that has made on everything I do, whether it's the time I spend out in the mountains, trail running, or rock climbing, or climbing a mountain, or whether that's me teaching a yoga class, or me sitting at my desk working, right? Whatever the thing is in life, there's this moment that happened back in 2020 that I wanted to share with you today. And in doing so, it's my hope that this impacts you in a similar way that leads us to make choices a little differently and to show up in each moment differently. And in doing so, really starts to shift the way that we show up in our lives and show up in the world. Okay, so let's get to that moment, right? This moment in 2020 where I was sitting alone in a fancy apartment in a city that I really didn't want to be in, right? I was there alone and looking out on the world. And as I was looking out on the world, it's no secret what I was seeing, right? I was witnessing such deep suffering and such darkness being brought out into our awareness, right? Into my field of awareness. And as I was sitting there witnessing the same thing that we were all witnessing, I was hit. I was hit with this deep, deep irony that has to do with the fact that every story I've been told in this 20 something years of life has to do with progress, has to do with making things better, has to do with solving problems. And the deep irony is, after having lived these storylines for 26, 7 years, I sat there looking out on the world and was hit with the hard truth that has to do with this world that is so hell-bent on continuous progress. It was out there burning. It was turning upside down, and out of all of it was just oozing with such darkness and suffering. And I was able, and this is the interesting part, because I wasn't sitting there in a state of judgment. I wasn't sitting there being super critical of the world, but instead sitting here witnessing it all play out in such a deep state of empathy. And I say empathy because I myself was experiencing the exact same thing in my own life, right? In my own life, that life where I had been living out this story that is continuously pushing for progress, continuously battling to solve problems, ever looking ahead at better and better days, and keeping my focus so fully on better and more and progress. And it was a few months before this turning upside down of our worlds that I myself had turned my own life upside down, because I had recognized one day that this full focus on making everything better and better and better had actually only led me to a state of deep suffering. So there, alone in an apartment, watching the world burn around me, I was able to feel it so fully, this deep irony that is a whole world that is so focused on better and progress and always looking towards the future. The deep irony of the pain and suffering and darkness that is actually alive here. So there is a lot that I have learned in the 3 years since those days. And it's these messages that is my deepest desire to bring out into the world, because never again do I want to be so focused on better that I'm missing out on what is playing out right here and right now. Because as it turns out, surprise, surprise, that life is lived right here, right now, as it ever unfolds into the future. But if we live there, out there in the future, if we spend all of our time out there in the future, then we can never be right here. So it was in those days that I created Upward Slopes, and I created it as a platform to explore this space, to explore how we can set our sights on the future, how we can work to solve problems, how we can make our world a better place, how we can make our own lives a better place. How can we actually do this in a way that is grounded in reality as it's playing out here and now, ever unfolding in the here and now? So that's entirely what I'm focused on these days. And it plays out in many different areas, right? It plays out in the world of health, which is where I was completely focused on before this time that we were talking about. It plays out in the greater picture that is our lives, right? Because really, at the end of the day, that's what matters, is how are we showing up in our lives, right? How are we making choices? How are we being in each experience as our life unfolds? And what are all the different important parts to bring into that? Health is certainly one. Thinking about our health conscious choices so that we can show up as life is unfolding with as much presence and as little suffering as possible. Okay, so before wrapping up here, I wanted to bring us back to this moment and the big thing that shifted within me, right? My big realization that completely changed how I show up in each moment as my life is unfolding. And the secret here, right, that I wish to not be a secret, right, to share with everyone is actually very simple. Now, the lesson I learned has everything to do with spending less time up in our heads in that world of the future, right? It's up in our heads where we are continuously thinking and continuously imagining a different experience than the one that is being lived right here, right now. So the practice, right? I'm going to make this completely practical for you. The practice becomes spending more time getting out of up here and feeling into what is truly right here, right now. And we can do it right here, right now, very simply. Can you take a moment, feel your feet on the floor? I mean it. Can we do it right here, right now? Can you get out of this space that's this chatter up here and take a moment to feel your feet on the floor? And from here, can you take a moment to find your breath? Maybe you're feeling it in the rise and fall of your chest, or maybe you can feel it as the air comes in through your nose and out through your mouth. It doesn't particularly matter where, but can you find your breath? Can you be with your breath? And is there anything else here in this moment? Any feeling, any sensation that wants to be felt? Can you be with it here? Just for a few brief moments. Are there any sounds, any smells? Just take a moment here. Just play with your direct experience in this moment in time. So as in these days in 2020, when I'm looking out on the world out there burning, and I'm feeling into my own experience, my own life burning, and I recognize that it is really difficult sometimes to be in the present moment. The present moment is often unpleasant, sometimes painful, sometimes boring. So we take ourselves out of it. We live in stories of other. We live in stories of the future. We live here fully, so fully, always weaving stories of how tomorrow, next year, the next decade is going to be better. And we do that. We live that every day, over and over again, until we find ourselves on our deathbeds and realize that we never gave ourselves the time to be here right now. And again, I get it. It's hard. It's often very challenging to be with the sensations that are right here and right now. And there's a cycle here that plays out. Because if we can't be with the difficult experiences that are here and now and forever live elsewhere, then these dark, difficult experiences will forever be our reality, right? Because we're never going to be here to actually feel into what is right here. And that is how this darkness that is so alive in our world keeps repeating itself. And that's why these problems that we have all around us and within us keep playing out. Again, this deep irony, right? With this disconnect that is always wanting better, but never doing the thing that is needed to make things better. And it all starts with being with what is right here, right now, even when it's painful, right? And there's a skill there. There's practices to help us, because it's not something that's always best to dive in fully with everything that you are. So we'll leave those types of conversations, right? The how we actually get to doing this, to being more fully present. We'll leave those for another day. But today I leave you with the very simple practices that I guided you through earlier on, right? Very simple practices. Can you be with your breath? Can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you hear the sounds? Being with these simple practices. And from there, we can start to dive deeper. And as we start to dive deeper and bring this sort of experience more fully into our lives, perhaps from this space, we actually begin to create that real change that we have been chasing after for far too long. So thank you so much for listening today. If you haven't yet, please like, subscribe. It helps me, it helps you, so that you see the next videos coming up. And yes, I look forward to seeing you in the next space.